Great stuff. Now we start with our big interview with Jeremy Hunt. And he's told GB News that the government must change the UK's economic model so we don't rely on mass migration to boost the economy at last. The Chancellor was speaking after the all-powerful Office for Budget Responsibility has now accepted that net migration could be 315,000 every year, and that's up from their own prediction in November of 245,000. He's also defended the decision to give £1 million towards the cost of building a memorial to solely honour the Muslims who died in the First and Second World Wars. Mr. Hunt was speaking to our political editor, Christopher Hope.
Chairman Hunt, thank you for joining us today on GB News. We're looking back at your budget yesterday, the spring budget. The first announcement you made was a statue for Muslims who died in the First and Second World War. Why do you need a war memorial for Muslim soldiers when we already have one for all faiths and none?
Well, because I think it is important to recognise the contribution of 170,000 Muslims who died defending our freedoms. We have already, as a government, supported a memorial to Sikh soldiers who died. We supported a memorial to Black and African soldiers who died in Windrush Square in Brixton, and a very good proposal. I also, by the way, remembered the sufferings and worries of people of the Jewish faith in my autumn statement. So a very good proposal was made to me by Sajid Javid,
yes,
who is a colleague and a friend, and I decided I'd have merit.
And the way you framed the answer by saying we need to fight extremism and heal divisions after the loss of life in Israel and Gaza. Will that memorial do that?
I believe it will, because I think it shows what unites us, just as the funding that I gave to the Holocaust Education Trust after the autumn statement did. It reminds us that on many things, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's the sacrifices made in the world wars for our freedom, we stand together as human beings, and that was the purpose of that funding.
So it shouldn't be a divisive thing?
No.
On immigration, you said 3 times that growth cannot come from unlimited migration, but the OBR, as you know, has increased net migration forecast to 315,000, up by about a third. So you're relying on more migration to grow your economy when you say you can't rely on it?
No. We have had a big increase in migration in recent years because of Ukraine, because of Afghanistan, because of Hong Kong, very specific factors, where as a country we did the right thing. But the current levels of migration are not sustainable. This government wants to bring it down. It's currently, as you know, over 700,000, far too high. The government's brought in some very clear policies to bring those numbers down. The OBR make an estimate of where that will get to based on what the Office for National Statistics say. It's a small increase on the numbers the ONS previously said. What I'm saying is we've got to change that. We need to change our model so that we are not relying on companies being able to expand by hiring more and more workers from overseas, because we've got 10 million adults of working age in this country who are not in work. And that's why in every budget I've done, I've taken big steps to try and break down the barriers to work, whether it's the childcare measures, getting rid of the lifetime allowance on pensions, the back to work programme for disability benefits. All those things are going to make a difference, and that is how we need to help our businesses grow.
Your old colleague wants to maybe cut taxes for companies that employ British workers and don't employ foreign workers. Is that an idea you might look at?
Well, I think we want all companies to employ British workers. We don't want to be dependent on unlimited migration. There's always going to be a role for people with very particular skills that we don't have here. But we should be aiming to tap into the potential of the brilliant people that we have at home first and foremost. Tory
MPs say you're too wedded to the OBR. Are you? I mean, you're free to do what you like, but of course the OBR must score your tax cuts or spending choices against what they plan for the economy. Do you think it's got too much power now?
Well, I think we are better having an OBR. It was set up by a Conservative government because we didn't believe the forecast that Gordon Brown was making in his budgets when chancellors would announce Treasury forecasts and people worried that chancellors were cooking the books to make things look more favourable than they actually are. All the OBR does is it says independently is the government meeting its own fiscal rules? And so it doesn't decide those fiscal rules, it just takes the rules that I decide and says if we're meeting them or not. I'm not saying we can't improve the system we have, but if I give you one example, I'm the first Chancellor where the OBR has actually scored the dynamic impact of my policies. So they said that my cuts in national insurance in the autumn and in this budget are going to add nearly 0.5% to GDP. That's a positive thing, and that flows in the numbers. I think, when we're trying to rebuild trust in politicians, it's better to have bodies who independently verify what we say on something as important as the budget.
Real-time scoring. You haven't cut income tax. Some thought you might do. Jacob Rees-Mogg, your colleague in Parliament, who also works at GB News, he said this kind of nickel and diming won't make a lot of difference. Have you been fiddling around when you could have been more dramatic, more political, maybe?
Well, it's not nickel and diming to cut national insurance payments by 1/3. That means
in 3 months.
In 3 months. That means that the person on the average wage is going to see their tax bill fall by about £900. That is a very significant reduction in taxation in a context of taxes that have overall had to go up to pay for the pandemic and the energy crisis that we've had. We accept that. I think it was the right thing to support families through a difficult period. But the choice now in British politics is that the Conservatives want to bring taxes down. So we want to start that journey. We've done it in yesterday's budget. We did it in the autumn statement. And both times we did it without increasing borrowing, without reducing the resources available for public services. And we'd like to continue on that path because we think it's wrong to have a double tax on work. We need to be an economy that makes work pay. But at the moment, if you work, it gets taxed twice, through national insurance and through income tax.
So Nix might go, is that the target eventually?
Well, we've said we want to end the unfairness. The direction of travel we've gone is to reduce national insurance by 1/3. The fact that Labour are opposing this today is really because Labour don't have any plans to reduce taxation. It just sort of makes my point for me. Their plan is basically that tax should remain at its current levels. We say we don't have to accept the status quo. If you make difficult decisions, if you stick to our plan for the economy that's seen inflation falling and growth starting to rise, we can bring down the tax burden, and that's what we're committed to doing.
You've fixed those tax thresholds, haven't you, which allows the Treasury to hoover up all sorts of tax revenues from millions of people and almost increase, and eventually probably increase the size of the state. Those thresholds are the problem, aren't they?
Well, what increased the size of the state was the government stepping in to help businesses and families in a once-in-a-century pandemic. That was 370 billion. And then another 100 billion actually when it came to the energy crisis. We had to pay for that through tax rises. The freezing of the thresholds was one of those. But take someone on an average salary, which is £35,000. The freezing of the thresholds in this coming year will cost them about £230. The reduction in national insurance will save them about £900. So they are seeing their taxes going down.
OK. You said in your speech the average earner has the lowest effective tax rate since 1975. What does that mean? Does that include indirect taxes like council tax, vehicle tax, other taxes we all pay?
No, the effective tax rate is on income and social security contributions. So it's income tax and national insurance.
So you're ignoring the elephant in the room, aren't you? All the other indirect taxes we pay more than we used to in the 70s.
No, I'm not, because I'm accepting that the tax burden has gone up, and I'm saying I want to bring it down. But I'm also saying that in a society where we want work to pay, then the effective tax rate that you pay for the work you do matters. And because we're cutting national insurance, the OBR independently, that's why it's useful to have someone who makes these numbers independently, so you know it's not something I'm making up, independently say, that'll bring the equivalent of around 200,000 people more into the workforce, fill about 20% of the vacancies across the country. Now, what you see is that the effective tax rate, which takes account of thresholds and the headline rate for tax and the headline rate for national insurance, that is now at its lowest level since 1975. But one thing I would also say, it is also lower than every other major economy. It's lower than America, than Germany, and than France.
Okay. There's been frustration amongst our viewers and listeners about when you remove a threat, 5p won't go on unleaded petrol, on a litre of it. There's a freeze in fuel duty. Why not cut charges for hospitality, for example? Pubs are screaming out for more support than not being taxed more.
Well, I think pubs have done incredibly well. We have said this year we will reduce the business rates that pubs pay, and indeed shops, by 75%. That's a 3/4 reduction in their business rates. It's about £13,000 for the average pub. So on top of that, yesterday I announced that we're freezing fuel duty until February of next year. So we absolutely want to support the great British pub.
Yeah, and cutting taxes for them, that's what the point is, rather than not increasing it. That's the difference.
Well, we have cut taxes for them. We've reduced business rates by 75%, Chris.
Just very quickly, some viewers have sent in some questions to our email address. Christopher, not me, but a veteran and a pensioner, has said that you haven't got a clue about living on a pension. You give with one hand, take away with another. Why are pensioners feeling worse off? I know you'll say they're going up with the increase in April, but they feel worse off. Is that right?
Well, I think everyone feels worse off. I mean, we have to be honest with people. We've had a once-in-a-century pandemic. We stepped in with things like the furlough scheme, which meant that the government paid your salary even if you didn't go to work. That saved over 10 million jobs. It was the right thing to do. And as a result of that, businesses emerged with limited damage and unemployment has stayed low. But there was a cost to that for all of us. Now, when it comes to what the government wants to do is to try and help everyone. So what we have done with pensioners is we've stuck to our triple lock promise. That means that pensioners have seen their pension go up by 10% last year, and it's about to go up by 8.5%. So that's £900 in the coming year. That is a big increase. The other thing we've done for pensioners yesterday is we put many billions of pounds into completely modernising the NHS so that, without employing more doctors, we'll be able to do more operations. People won't have to wait so long. So I think we've done a lot to recognise the great contribution that pensioners make.
And defence spending appears to fall in the Red Book, but it might be going up slightly because of other numbers that aren't in the Red Book. Given the world situation, Dennis Northumberland says, why was there no more money for defence?
We will need to spend more on defence. The world is a very volatile and dangerous place. Britain has a very special global vocation. Alongside America, we're one of the two countries that have done more than anyone else to maintain peace and security since the Second World War.
So 2.5% of GDP is your idea?
We've said that we want to increase it to 2.5% of GDP as soon as it's economically possible to do so. But there's a lot of things we have to work out, in particular what we would spend any extra money on. If you look at the war in Ukraine, you can see that drones have become incredibly important. So we need to do that. We need to reform our defence procurement, which is not working in the way it does. But we recognise that this is a world in which we're going to spend more on defence.
Just a final question, and thank you for your time, Chancellor. Is this the last we'll hear from you with the red box, or even giving out a fiscal statement? There's rumours of a autumn statement again, which might cut income tax maybe in September ahead of a November election. Well, 3 ifs in there, but I can ask you the question.
Yeah. I hope it's not the last you hear from me, because I'm loving being Chancellor. I want to be Chancellor for a long time. We have to have a general election. The Prime Minister says it'll be before the end of the year, and so in the end it's in the hands of the electorate.
When would you have it?
Well, that's up to the Prime Minister. It's way above my pay grade to make those calculations, Chris.
Jeremy Hunt, thank you for asking today into number 11 Downing Street. Thank you.
Thank you.